So thank you so much, Cara, and thank you to the team for inviting me to be here tonight. I am here speaking on behalf of Kensal Green Mutual Aid Group, and we have been up and running now for a grand total of 6 weeks. So really great to hear from Red Cross and the Environment Agency, people who have much more experience than us. But I want to speak today a little bit about what we've been doing in the last 6 weeks and how we have set up to respond to the gaps that are appearing in the community in light of the pandemic. So like I say, I'm a volunteer in Kensal Green, and that is in northwest London. And as Cara said, when there isn't a pandemic, I am working in consumer insights, but it's fair to say that that has taken rather a backseat in the last few weeks. So just a quick overview, what is mutual aid? And I chose this quote from this journalist who describes it this way. He says, "I don't believe in charity, I believe in solidarity. Charity is so vertical, it goes from the top to the bottom, whereas solidarity is horizontal. It respects the other person and have a lot to learn from other people." So mutual aid is an old, arguably an ancient concept, and at its core, it believes that we can all help each other, we have enough resources to help one another outside of the system. And so in this case, that looks like neighbours helping neighbours through the COVID-19 crisis. It's important to note that mutual aid is not an organisation. It's not capital M, capital A mutual aid. It's rather a concept of self-organisation that does not rely on other agencies or charity, although as you see, we have been collaborating across those types of organisations as well. At the moment, all the groups that I know of are self-funded. They don't rely on outside funding, so either they have pooled funds or volunteers are reaching into their own pockets, and that in itself shows that it is a mutual effort. So what I'm going to talk about today is the kind of journey that we've been on as a little group in Kensal Green, and my own reflection is that or my own learning is that we, despite our flat structure, we don't have to be unsystematic. And so we've gone from being neighbours with kind of a shared purpose, but no real way in which to connect with those who are in need, through to this kind of massive 200 strong WhatsApp group, which was a very crowded channel with lots of volunteers all trying to help the same person at the same time, which is obviously quite overwhelming for all parties involved, through to our current setup, which I'll talk a bit more about, being a network of neighbours who are happily helping and being helped. Success. So I will say that every mutual aid group does its own thing in its own way. That's the whole idea of it. There are, for example, our neighbouring ward, Harlesden, has very much stayed in that middle panel of a huge WhatsApp group, and it works great for them. Their WhatsApp is constantly pinging with offers and requests for help, and it's all going swimmingly. But we have taken a more systemized approach, which I will explain. So what do we actually do? This is, I guess, our service, if you want to call it that, has broken down into these 4 stages. So we reached out to our neighbours. We flyered our whole ward, which was about 6,000 households, once before lockdown and once since. And that leaflet features a central number and central email address, which allows neighbours to call in or write in. There are about a dozen phone handlers who receive those calls, receive those emails, and they triage those requests through essentially a ticketing system, which is a bit like any system that a customer service line would use. They log those needs securely and they assign them through that system through to the correct teams. So usually it's what we call the street teams, who are responsible for helping do food shops, helping pick up prescriptions, or even just give a neighbour a friendly phone call. If for whatever reason we can't deal with that request at that time, we might refer it to a different agency, or for super serious safeguarding cases, to the council. So 5 key elements that I wanted to talk you through today, which I feel like helped us get off the ground as we did. So a degree of centralisation, like I say, flat does not mean unsystematic. Identifying skills in order to resource our teams. Local action in terms of delivering the help, but also wider knowledge sharing across the borough. And then referrals and partnerships that we very much lean on in order to kind of complement what we're doing. We signpost to them. And then lastly, the fact that we've built a spectrum for kind of all cases from simple through to complex. So before I get into talking about centralisation, just the first thing to note here is that we leafleted with paper, physical leaflets through doors by hand with a landline number. And that was super, super crucial to our outreach efforts in order to reach those who really need us most. A lot of the residents that we've been helping and serving don't have access to the internet. Some don't even have a TV at home. And so to receive this through their door was really important in knowing, you know, how to find that help. So you might have already seen the viral kindness flyer on the left there. It did, as its name suggests, go viral. And its simplicity is beautiful. It involves just putting your name and number and posting it through someone's door, a very one-to-one relationship. We've taken a rather more centralized approach, as you can see on the right. As I mentioned, we use a central number and a central kind of triage system. And that's for a few different reasons, primarily because of safeguarding, so that volunteers are not giving out their personal number, but also so that we can store the requester's details in a safe way that protects them. Also, it's about sharing resource, so funds, and it's about sharing knowledge as well, so ensuring that our teams can learn from one another. And lastly, it's about preventing volunteer burnout. In that one-to-one situation, you can come across occasions where one person is helping someone who has a lot of needs, and actually they might need a team behind them, and that's what we try to provide through our system. So secondly, and this might sound obvious, but we put a lot of effort into identifying the skills across our group of 200 volunteers. This was essentially a huge recruitment drive that we did a week or two into setting up. And it was absolutely key for us because it helped us to actually set up a system. I know that sounds really obvious coming from business, coming from design, but I think, you know, a lot of people joining up were thinking, oh, I can just, you know, help with a food shop. But in fact, we really needed to systemize in order that those things were done well and done properly. And so we did. We recruited the teams to build that system, and then later on we did a call out for those who wanted to deliver that on the ground help and who could populate that system to deliver it. So how do we actually deliver the help? It's hyper-locally through the 6 kind of sub-area teams that you can see on the left there that we've split the area down into. So those areas contain 5 to 10 roads each, and each of those areas has a team of probably 15 to 20 volunteers assigned to it. And it just means that help can be sourced super quickly because the volunteer and the requester are likely to live, you know, a couple of roads away from each other. Importantly, it also helps to preserve that feeling of neighborliness, which really is at the core of mutual aid efforts. And those relationships are the kind of thing that can get lost when you're building processes in a system like this, especially doing it so quickly. And so we really encourage people to, where appropriate, stay in touch with those they're helping, even, you know, take it off the ticketing system after a while and just develop that relationship very personally. So that helps us to do that. And then on the right is a much larger map of Brent. You can see just how huge it is, and that breaks down into 21 different wards. And of course, there are, you know, so many skills and backgrounds represented across the borough, and that makes knowledge sharing very crucial. It's really helped us to get off the ground by tapping into just the wealth of knowledge that exists in the borough. This map itself is a great example of that, where one lady sat down with all the demographic data from across Brent and built this fabulous map, which not only shows where the ward boundaries lie, but the number of households in each area, each sub-area, and then also the proportion of people over 70 who are likely to be particularly adversely affected by this crisis. So we have a regular knowledge sharing practice every week where representatives from each ward get together and just, you know, share with folks what they'd be doing, what help they might need. So initially those were simpler, or actually not so simple, questions about, you know, how do you reimburse without using cash? What telephone line are you using? Who are the services who are offering that for free? And eventually it's evolved more into a kind of decision-making forum. So we have working groups who look at areas such as food aid, safeguarding, finances, areas which require best practice to be built, and also potentially policy to be kind of council facing or facing other agencies. So that collaboration piece has been super crucial for us. So I just want to talk about the referrals and partnerships, which we've lent on really heavily. Obviously at any time, pandemic or no pandemic, collaboration is really crucial, but it's felt especially key during this time. In particular, we've worked with Elders Voice, who are a local charity working with older folks. They initially got in contact with us because a couple of their drivers went into isolation around the time of lockdown, and so they began referring cases through to us where we could help neighbours with shopping, and eventually we've been able to refer back to them, and so it's a two-way partnership. In particular, we've had an older man calling us the last couple of weeks who just has a lot of different issues, health issues, financial issues, and really needed someone to come alongside him and help walk him through the system. And so they've been able to do that for us, which is fantastic. We're also looking at becoming a non-government food referral agency for the likes of Sufra, local food bank, and others in the area. And I also just want to give a massive shout out to Daksha, who is up in Alperton, who is a lady who has been cooking, no joke, 2,000 curries every day for distribution to key workers and recipients of mutual aid. And mutual aid have helped to coordinate a bunch of drivers for her to distribute her amazing cooking efforts. So lastly on this front, when I asked the team today what they thought I should talk about, they said, talk about the fact that we've built this system which handles this whole spectrum of cases, everything from help, I'm in isolation, can you post this letter for me, through to folks who have no food, gas, electricity, and need hot food, tonight. And so my reflection on that is that, to build that level of flexibility, I think we needed not to be precious, not ever to consider something underneath us, but I mean, that's obvious, but also not to be precious about cases and, not being afraid to refer them to those who can offer longer term help, where realistically, we're just a bunch of volunteers who've been doing this for 6 weeks or less. So I will say there have been challenges. I think that's always the way when you're trying to set something up so fast. But the main one would be that we have all the same purpose, but different values. So some folks have come into this as lifelong activists who are in for the long haul. They want to see major political overhaul after the pandemic is over. Others have just come into it for the short term, who have seen the needs of people who are self-isolating and just want to help in a really practical way. So of course, those different values have sometimes caused a bit of friction. For most of our team, we've only ever met online. So the friendship and the trust that you might usually build at the water cooler, or even better, over a pint, has had to be built in other ways. And lastly, transparency. As things have developed so fast, it has been tricky to keep, our 200 volunteers up to speed with every change that happens. So we are looking currently at how to become more transparent, become more accountable to our community. So what is next? At some point, lockdown will end, but of course we don't want the community spirit and the community effort that we've built to just go away after that. So we're looking into increasing the mutuality of what we're doing, increasing building kind of community initiatives, and looking at further ways to show solidarity towards our neighbours. So helping those through the inevitable economic recession that's to follow, helping those who are already affected by employment, and just generally being able to build that community in a way that lasts. So appreciate that that's been a whistle-stop tour of what we're doing, and please do get in touch or ask questions through Slido. Very happy to take them. Thanks everyone.